All right. So, folks, now I want to ask a general question because, we are really engaged in these multiple texts. And though they are happening in parallel across meetups over time, all of us who are engaged with it are seeing effects of these texts on us. So I want to ask you what these texts are doing for you. So for example, I just want to give you an illustration. The thing that really struck, I'm not familiar with the art of war. The thing that really struck me is the reality-orientedness of Sun Tzu, of just paying attention to all the causalities and all the effects, all the causes and all the effects of everything, instead of romanticizing it that many, many, many people in the war do. It is very much this worldly approach to saying what is actually going on, just paying attention to the real things. And if you get only that much from Sun Tzu, that is quite a bit. And what happens is that all of these works provide something like that. It is a different way of approaching a problem. Like, for example, the point that Quan was making was about outer versus inner. Most people think of it as an outer issue, but it is actually an inner issue. So there is inner and outer. There is a relationship between inner and outer, which is a very profound point that runs across all these three corpus. We are talking about these products of roughly the axial age. This is between, before printing. This is after advent of writing, after development of cities and large civilizations. And these works are works of consciousness, of trying to make sense of what is going on in here and out there, and the relationships between them, relationships between the individual and others, and grappling with those issues. And each of them does it in their own way. So I would love to hear any comments that you have about what you have learned from these works, because modern times are very different from the context of these times. So what is it that you're getting from any of these, not just Chinese, not just Indian, not just the Gospel of John? You can pick and choose. You can take one point. You can do any comparisons that you have. Would love to hear from you what this focus on these works that we have been doing. 52 Living Ideas, we made a commitment to actually immersing ourselves in a very serious way in each of these works. What is that doing for you? As a whole, in particular, you're welcome to take it along any axis or any aspect, larger, smaller, it doesn't matter. Would love to hear from you. We're going to start with Evanik. Evanik.
So I think one of the things that strikes me is that there are universal principles throughout all of these works. And the first word that comes to mind is balance. And by balance, I mean a focus on both the inner self and the outer self. The focus between self-care and self-love, and the focus on loving others. I think even in this text of The Art of War, you can see Sun Tzu really loves his people because he's weighing the options of war. And he's spending time having the leaders consider, is the cost worth going to war? Because like Jason said in his translation, there is going to be damage and there is a cost to it. And if you're not going to go into this strategically, or for the right reasons, or not having the love of your country, ask yourself, is this really worth it? And I think if you take that approach and you take it to decisions of your life, I think it's very valuable and very applicable to everyday life. Weigh the cost. What are the costs? What are the damages, especially with major decisions? And if you can justify it, then, you know, then think about it some more. Let's break it down deeper, right? Because I think even though Sun Tzu is a general and he understands that sometimes war is necessary, he also realizes that a lot of times it's not necessary. And he's had enough experience and he's seen enough to know, to really question leaders to make them understand what they're going through or what they're about to do. I think relating it to the Bible, Jesus gives, you know, he, he, he allows people to weigh the cost, right? He tells you to, pick up your cross and bear it daily. And the way I see it is, you know, understand that this life will come with troubles, right? But you don't have to create those troubles, you don't have to do anything. Like, they're just going to come to you, and you can either live your life in a way that you can look at yourself in the mirror and be proud of yourself, or you can look at your life and do what other people think you should do, or do what or focus on the attachments of the world and act in accordance that way. But there are consequences to each. There are results to each. And I think there's a level of responsibility for whatever decision you make, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And I think taking responsibility for a decision or a choice that you make is clear. It's clear, right? And it's like, make sure it's clear that you're going to take responsibility for whatever happens. And I think going back to the art of war, really studying out that decision, really thinking about it, taking the time. And I think that's a qualifier in all the works. Like, even in the Gita, where they're at the beginning of the war. The story starts at the beginning of the war, right? And Arjun is like weighing the cost and looking at who he's fighting. And he's really asking Krishna, is this worth it? And only through going through all 18 chapters of the Gita and really exploring why he's doing it, is he ready to go to war, and he's ready to do it. And I think that's in reality, because when you weigh your options, that's when you know you're ready to go. It's something internal that says to you, this is the time. But at the same time, you have to clear out everything that's hindering you. You have to clear out the attachments. You have to clear out, people's views, and you have to really weigh in on it and just make the decision on your own. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't take the advice of others. Some of the advice may be very wise, but then you have to, again, distinguish that for yourself. So I see these principles, even though they're ancient texts, they're principles. And I remember Jordan Peterson always says, a story, why do people use stories? Because stories are easier to remember than historical facts. And the stories are there to teach you something. And I think all of these ancient texts that we've been studying is there to teach us lessons on life. And for each person, that's going to be different. Like, I could tell you the lessons I've learned of balance and, watching my actions towards other people, seeing the God in others. All those principles have done to my life. It's helped make my relationships better. It's helped me to be calmer. It's helped me to deal with people that I don't want to deal with on a daily basis, but it has helped me a lot. It has kept me a lot calmer. But someone else in the same meetup may be getting totally different things from it. So I think what we bring to the text is our experience in our lives. And if we do that, if we bring the experience that we have to the text and are open to the text, you could get so much from your life. So those are my thoughts.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Evanique. Now, what I want to do is I want to just highlight a few points just for others. There's no way I can do justice to everything that you said. You talked about the universal principles that run actually across all these works. And it's very interesting to see those principles in multiple forms across the work. Second, you talked about the principle of balance. You're working out all of these balances between individual and society, your emotions and your thinking. Then you talked about this approach in Sun Tzu, where you're taking something which is highly emotionally charged topic of war and bringing this level of thinking, just clear-headed, realistic thinking to it. You talked about the conscious living that Jesus talks about and wanting to and being prepared to give up, to sacrifice things, sacrifice attachments that don't go towards that. You talked about the power of the story and character that shows us what virtue is through example. So these are some of the things that you talked about. So thank you so much. Next up is going to be Kwan, followed by Joe. Kwan.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm delighted by Evanique's comment because precisely the core of my comment is about the timeless and universal nature of those teachings. Okay, through the three matrices of China, India, and the West. And what I would like to offer is that maybe some words, because they are words, because my foundational hypothesis about philosophy or about human philosophy is that the human beings are preoccupied by the same things, okay? And sometimes of course, there are differences between the different civilizations and cultures and matrix. And most of the time, those differences come from the languages, okay? Because I think that those three great civilizations are preoccupied by the same thing. And because of their different classical languages, Sanskrit, Chinese, and Greek or Latin, but essentially Greek, uh, we might have the false idea that they are talking of something else, but in reality, it's the same. Uh, and it's about, I would call the animal kingdom and the divine kingdom, and how to make the animal kingdom and the divine kingdom be in a harmonious relations, because we are as a very special animal species. We have the animal dimension, of course, that is obvious, but we also have the divine dimension. And that is precisely the matching of those two that is our challenge or our endeavor as a human being, because a human being that is not capable to match those two dimensions will either be mad or be desperate. Okay, most of the time, the desperate people are the people born in poor or average families, and the mad people are the people born in powerful family. Why they are mad? Because they have the wherewithals, the means to be mad and to impose their madness on others. Uh, so uh, I would like to begin by the Chinese lexicon. Okay, uh, I think that you all saw the hexagram, okay, from the I Ching, the 6 lines, okay, the broken line or plain line. The hexagram is formed by the lower trigram, meaning the first line, the second line, and the third line from the bottom, and that is the animal kingdom. And the divine kingdom is the fourth line, the fifth line, and the sixth line. Okay, that is the Chinese symbolism. And I would jump at once to the Indian map because I would use the Chinese image, but the Indian words. Because the Indian will speak about, and I would call that the level 0, okay? Because for the Indians, you have 7 steps. For the Chinese and for the Greek, you have 6 steps, okay? So to make things equal, the first step of the Indian, I would call that step 0, okay? And that is Annamaya Kosh, okay? Annamaya Kosh is the envelope or the layer made of food, okay? The physical body. And the layer that I call number 1 is Pranamaya Kosh, meaning the layer made of energy. And the next one is Manomaya Kosh, meaning the layer made of intellect, meaning of words, of images, of concept. And the next one, and that is 1, 2, 3 for the Indians, okay? And after you go to 4, 5, 6 for the Indians, meaning Anandamaya Kosh, which is the soul, okay? Meaning the layer made of bliss. And finally, you have Brahman, meaning infinite in Sanskrit, and that is cosmos for the Chinese. And finally, you have the self or Param Brahman. So you see that because of different words, we might think that it's different stuff, but it's the same stuff. Okay, meaning the big human endeavor is precisely to match those 3 dimensions. And those ancient sages from the West, from China, from India, they were at the core of the human reality. And what we can learn from them precisely is to match those 2 dimensions, because the problem of our contemporary world, I think everywhere, our modern world, is that we are completely in the animal dimension. And we think that someone having a very big intellect is at the supreme realization of our human destiny, and he's only at the top of the animal kingdom and not at the top of what is possible for a human being. And I just want to take another 2 minutes for the Greek map, okay? Plato
Please take your
called the
time.
animal
This
kingdom.
is Kwan, this is beautiful. Please take your time.
Okay, so Plato called the animal kingdom doxa, meaning opinion, and the divine kingdom episteme, meaning knowledge. Okay, but knowledge in the sense of awareness. Okay, not knowledge in the sense of information. So for him, uh, the first layer is called eikasia. Eikasia is a Greek word, Eikasia, meaning the shadows. Okay, so eikasia 1 is the shadows, meaning the senses perception. And the level 2 is also eikasia, but eikasia 2, meaning the shadows 2, meaning the intellect. Okay, because the intellect, by giving a label to someone or to something, might make us think that we understand that something or that someone, and can make us falsely believe that we have a knowledge, but we only put a label on something or on someone. And after eikasia, you have pistis. Pistis is a Greek word meaning belief, Pistis, and it's the consensus of the experts of your society. Okay, but experts are humans too. Okay, they might be mistaken, or they might want to deceive you. Okay, so it's not the supreme in the human condition. So that's why Plato called, there is another step called episteme, the divine kingdom. And in that divine kingdom, corresponding to the upper trigram of the Chinese, and corresponding to 4, 5, 6, or to the soul, to Brahman and Parabrahman of the Indians, he will talk about dianoia, Dianoia, and it's the mathematical forms, beauty, called in Greek kalos, for because justice, kindness, courtesy is also part of beauties. Okay, it's not only mathematics or beautiful architecture or beautiful painting or beautiful sculpture. It's really the beauty of the human heart and of the human behavior. And after that, you have dialecticon. Dialecticon, we know the English word dialectics, okay, but dialecticon in Greek is richer. Dialecticon means a playful attitude, okay, playfulness, that you are uh, playful with yourself, with others, and with the exploration of the universe, okay. At that level, when you try to gain more knowledge, to understand more knowledge, it's to play, to be, and to share, and not to use it as a source of power. Because of course, knowledge at a low level can be a source of power, because of with knowledge you can make weapons, you can have a better organization. And I would say that in the Sun Tzu Ping Fa, you have a lower level of knowledge, organization, weapon making, finances, and so on. So you can win over your enemy, of course. But you have a higher level of knowledge too, is that you have to think before you go to war. Why do you want to go to war? Is it would be a good thing for you, for your nation, for the other nations? Is it a something fair, etc.? And at the last level of the Greek map, epistemological map, we have theoria. Theoria will give birth to theory in English, of course, but theoria, once again, in Greek is richer, because theoria means contemplation of the forms, okay, meaning that you are at the sun of the absolute, at the core of truth, precisely. When Arjun will achieve his journey of inner suffering, of distress, he will achieve that theoria, okay, he will truly have a contemplation of reality, of the supreme form of reality. And because of that, he will have an appeasement in his heart, and his soul will be capable to do his dharma, okay, his duty, because he's a warrior, and he will do what he has to do, but with an appeased heart and a capable soul. And I stop here. I just want to say that
Wonderful.
we talk about the same thing with different words.
Wonderful. Very beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you so much. I just want to add things that connect with what we've been studying. The fundamental point that you made about it is about divine and animal. It is divine and human. So there are multiple forms. I really liked your comparison of the hexagon and the spine, the seven chakras in Indian. But I want to extend that to what we've been studying in Gospel of John, in Louis Sullivan. So Louis Sullivan puts it beautifully. It's very simple. It is form follows function. So the spirit is expressed in matter. And there is this back and forth between the spirit and matter, between form and function. It is the spirit, it's a spiritual and material interacting with one another. There is the continuous cycle going on of, the way he puts it in his autobiography is that life began to break in upon him, and a continuous breaking in from outside and breaking out from inside was to shape his destiny. So there is this back and forth, almost breathing between the spirit and matter that goes on. The form in which it is captured in Bible, we've been studying Gospel of John, is Jesus, is 100% man, 100% God. That is exactly the same idea. It is, it's the core of it, and it's in Gospel of John, it is captured beautifully, this integration. Now, this integration is really sets these works apart from the modern times, because the modern time is analytical. It gets disintegrated because people just focus on individual things and forget how it is all connected. They focus on material things. Our mastery of the material world is just superb. But in so doing, our understanding of the interaction between the emotional and the material, between the thinking and the material, between the spiritual and the material, is really weakened. And what these works do is that in their own way, in their own vocabulary, they bring it together. Now, each of them does it in a very different way. Like the Chinese have a way of doing that visually somehow. I don't fully grasp it, but it is done in a visual way. There is a tremendous focus on visual. The way in which the Indians do it is through sound. You can best experience it in Indian classical music. And the word, the sound, in the beginning was the sound, Om. That's how Indian mind works. The Western mind is alphabetical. It goes in a sequence and it forms, in the beginning was the word. And these are all different ways. They're all trying to get to the same thing. But I mean, the thing is, all of these traditions are so deep, so powerful, and they have so much life-giving power to offer to each of us that I think we owe it to ourselves to be open to them, to kind of commune with them as best as we can and learn what we can from them. So thank you so much, Kwan. That was fantastic. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Paul. And anybody else wants to say anything, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Joe.
So it's really not fair to go after both of you guys. Because it's it was so beautifully stated already. I mean, everything. I think you kind of captured everything that we're trying to communicate. But I when I think of these three works, I see a lot of similarities, and I look at them as all, to some degree, addressing ourselves internally. Every single one of them, in one way, shape, or form, addresses our internal nature, and I think that essentially that whether it be the Bhagavad Gita through understanding our center, whether it's understanding our spirit with the Bible, or understanding nature, how we commune with nature with the Tao, and the ethics of Confucius as well. There is, Kwan said it beautifully, is that they're all answering the same questions in one way, shape, or form, but their way of expressing it is different. And that's the beauty of studying these works. You're studying different forms of expression and different experiences. And that, to me, connects very similar to some of the things that we're doing on Sundays with Buckminster Fuller. It really is a higher level way of thinking. You're connecting on a metaphysical level, and then you're understanding how it plays out in your physical life and every day, these diverse experiences that we have, that all of us have. And the more we integrate that, the more we understand ourselves in that process, and the more we understand the world around us. And it allows us to engage with the world on, and I mentioned this last week, on a much more authentic level, if you're truly open to these texts. And I find that to be, I wanted to kind of link this back to something that was being said on Sunday, is that one of the things that we, by doing this, is that we're integrating as many experiences as possible. And by doing that, we're understanding ourselves and how we interact with others. And that's just, to me, that's the beauty of all these texts. You can't, and I have to say, it's amazing it's for free. I mean, that's the other part. I mean, we have, Kwan, Jason, Aman, Yogeshwar, Gary, yourself, other people that have known the Bible too. And I'm leaving people out probably, but that's, I mean, you have to appreciate that alone, but then you get the depth of experiences that these individuals have. You're not going to get that anywhere else. And that's special. So for me, I look, so how has it changed me on a daily basis? I look at the world differently, completely. That's how it's changed me. I look at the whole entire world differently, and I think about people's perspective. And, you know, I'll just use one example that many times in Stoicism, there's this idea you're withholding judgment, right? But understanding the perspectives and experiences of others makes that simple from withholding judgment, because you've now integrated different ways of thinking, and it makes it easier to say, I want, you know, that you know, to maybe understand a different person, you know, different perspective. And I think that, yeah, you just understand the world holistically. I'll leave it at that, but it's special.
Wonderful.
It's
Thank
special.
you.
It's special. It's special.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. So I'll say several things. One is about kind of discovery of the inner. And the issue of multiple perspectives has everything to do with that. Because if you look at it, you know, it's very difficult to think about what's going on within you. So I'm going to, again, use an analogy. You basically have to use analogies to try to see what is going on. Because even if you look at the words that we use to think about what's going on in here, I see it, that's a bright idea, there was a flash. Oh, these are all visual terms. And then you talk about, I grasp it. It doesn't, you know, it's like, it's unclear, fuzzy. All of these are like analogies from visual sensation, analog of, so, you know, this is Julian Jaynes' point that consciousness is analog of the physical world. So just extending it to this work, you know, just like people think of Tao as outside, there is a Tao inside, which is the same Tao. You know, your consciousness is Tao, which is the inner Tao, and the outer Tao, it's basically one Tao. And what happens is that the more perspectives you get on it, it is like using different analogies. And each analogy is going to light things up. It is going to see, you're going to be able to see things that you did not see before. And so many people throughout history have used so many different analogies of thinking about what's going on in here, that by communing with that, by being open to that, it really you are able to really see what is going on in you by just honestly listening to what the other person is saying. You know, I'm going to again extend the definition of Buckminster Fuller. He calls it universe, but it's really the Tao. It's like he's saying the inner world is what he's talking about. He's saying it is the aggregation of all humanity's consciously apprehended and communicated non-simultaneous and only partially overlapping experiences. Okay, so it's like it's performing this massive and operation visually, saying yes to saying, oh, you know, Bhagavad Gita has this way of approaching. Oh, and this commentator Naneshwar has all of these metaphors. And Lao Tzu has this. And, you know, and the Gospel of John has this. And Bucky is saying this. And Louis Sullivan is saying that. And Russell Aikoff is saying that. And each of them is like multiple spotlights that together you are able to fill out what is going on. And the other thing I would say is that it's actually not free. It is extremely expensive, because what you really have to pay for is you have to do the work yourself, because you can get nothing from any of these things without you doing the work. And the hardest part of work is to let go of things that you're used to, because that, it is the principle of sacrifice. It is a principle of attachment. Most of us are creatures of habit. That is our animal nature, and rightly so. But this spiritual nature, consciousness, is all about getting a perspective on it and being able to rise above it. Metanoia. Metanoia is all about kind of thinking beyond what you were thinking to get a perspective on it. And that is the hard work. And I am just honored to have so many people here who are doing that, because that's the only way to create value for yourself and for other people. And it's the same root. It's the same root of being willing to actually listen to others, including these great sages, all the wisdom traditions, and to speak. So the conversation between Krishna and Arjun, that is the model. But you can be, it's the Nar Narayan, that's the other avatar of Krishna, where it is Nar is man and Narayan is God. They were twins and they had one soul between them. That is actually human being. We have that dual both in us, and there is that soul flowing between the two. And that's what this is about. So Joe, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I really, really, I'm grateful to you for everything that you bring to this meetup. So thank you so much, my friend. Next up is going to be Paul. Paul.
Yeah, pleasure. Hi, everyone. And I'm always singing Srikant's praises, so I don't need to add to what Joe says. But even tonight, every time when I'm about to talk, I have 10 different things I want to say by the time you get to me, because you guys say such important, interesting things. But I'll try to just summarize first on what these meetups are about. I see tonight more like you were putting us through a course for like a year or two, depending on who's here and what, so that we can each speak and pick what metaphor we want to bet the best representation of an idea. But we had to do the work so that we can talk this way. So that's what you've given us. That's another way of describing what you've given us here. So thank you for that. Now back to the metaphors and what we're talking about tonight, which is that. I'm so glad you gave us a chance to talk about how we relate all the other things to this. Now, I'm going to be a little controversial in that I like to talk, Srikant has trained me this, not from some scholar point of view, but how it strikes me. That's all I can really do. So before all this period, I had a streak in me that said the following logic. All those great texts, well, they're great, but 1 billion people read them over many, many centuries, and they still screwed up royally. And this thing that I think in the modern paradigm, or one paradigm called the mandate of heaven, was co-opted. It wasn't just co-opted by the military-industrial complex. It's been co-opted since 200 BCE. So all these texts then there's the Crusades and Christianity, and there's 1 million. You could try to decide how many wars were justified by these texts versus prevented. And I'm not sure you'd come up with an answer. So I had this very cynical, that we might want, but I had a very cynical view of the texts. Although there was a little germ in me that said, yeah, but there might be something there. So, pay some attention. So here's my latest thought on how this strikes me, which is, though, Srikant, one night you said that both in India and in the US, the respective texts that are sort of native to the West or the East are not well understood, and they're superficially used. But my point is, that's why the mandate of heaven can get co-opted. But another reason was all stated in the books we're talking about. But I'll put it in the Louis Sullivan metaphor, which is that you have a divine, I added the word divine, a divine form, and there'll always be something lost in the translation to function while we're incarnated, so to speak, in human form, trying to bring the forms into, and because that's inherent in the universe, and that's what these texts teach. The disorder that the mandate of heaven talks about will exist. And what I love about the art of war is, here's my version of what it's saying, and this is from like Bruce Lee movies, or I don't know where, but if you must fight, win. And that's what the whole book is about. But the Tao itself, would you guys agree, is the most peaceful of all of them. The original Tao that we studied, and I'm not a scholar. I'm thinking it was like, unlike the other texts that use war as paradigms and examples, it's like, hey, peace, that's the best path. I may be wrong about that, but it also recognizes that dichotomy that you guys have talked about, that leads to the inevitability that leads to the need for a book called The Art of War. Oh, that's my best. Thank you for giving me a chance.
Wow. All right, Paul. So I'm going to comment on a few things here. So I'm going to start first with the idea of the best metaphor. And I think all of us have to keep coming up with the best metaphor all the time and be open to the possibility of the better metaphor all the time. Because growth, this is what we learned from Owen Barfield. It is that conscious experience of a new metaphor showing you something about a sensibility that you're not even imagined. That's what a metaphor does. And by the way, tomorrow we are going to be talking about the beauty of language. So if you would like to join that, that would be wonderful. So, you can look at progress, individual progress as mastering, using, and overcoming and coming up with new metaphors all the time and seeing connections between that. The second point I want to make is that point that you made, the large point you made about co-opting of these texts. And it happens all the time. And the best formulation of that comes from Louis Sullivan. Form follows function. So there is spirit that produces things. But most people don't want to do the work of the spirit, of the function. They say forms are here. And then they use them to basically enslave people so that they cannot function anymore. And it's a very easy thing to do. It is low effort. It speaks to our habitual nature. You hold on to the forms that you have, the matter that you have, you have, and it works both internally and externally. It is not just about, it's about freedom. It's like the spirit is freedom. It's like freedom of your thought, being internally free and externally free. But the moment you get attached to forms, then you both become externally unfree and internally unfree. So for example, if you get attached to the things that you have, you're focused on that. Your inner freedom is gone because you are attached to that rather than your Atma, rather than your spirit. You lose your looking away from the center of your being to the periphery. And when you turn your back on the center, that is darkness, because that's all you are looking at. So there is a tendency, no matter how great the work is, it is always going to end up that way. So it happens in India, it happens in the West, and all kinds of bad things are produced as a result of it, because bad people use these forms and the prestige of the once living function in order to enslave other people. And it happens, enslave is a strong word, but it's a real word. It happens psychologically, it happens physically, it happens in wars, it happens all, in many, many different ways. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the spirit is real, the function is real, it was there, and it is there in you anytime you want it. It's just a question of whether you're going to do the effort. You're going to say yes to the spirit and yes to the Tao, or you're going to say yes to 10,000 things. And you're right, the Tao is actually in some ways, the most fundamental. I shouldn't say that. It focuses on the most fundamental issue. And that is, it is what it is, Tao is what it is. And you have to start with that. Because if you lose that, and it is so afraid of losing that it keeps coming back to that. And in a sense, it is right, because if you lose that, you lose everything. Okay. But the Indian thought and the Western thought somehow manages to rise above that without losing the connection with the Tao. So for example, my favorite example of that is Nyaneshwar talking about the same issue. This is Brahma. Brahma is the Tao. So he said, how can you name Brahma? How is it even possible to name Brahma? He says, let me show you how. Okay. So he says, look, when you have a child, the infant, okay, you give it a name. You call it Om. But that name is only as good as your love for the child and what you're prepared to do for it. If you say Om to the child as if you mean it, and you're ready to do everything for it, everything in accordance to its nature, then the child will respond to you. And then you have the word. Now that is a word which is a functional word. It is not the corpses of words that we use. All words were actually living at one point of time. But most people just use corpses of words. Their meaning is gone, their roots are gone, their history is gone. They're just passing. These are like coins which have lost all its imprints and it's their unique natures, and people are just passing around, thinking that they're doing something which they are not. So there is a way. So that is the connection between the Tao and the Indian tradition or the Western tradition of in the beginning was the word. Because the word, when John says in the beginning was the word, and the word was with God, and the word was God, what he's saying is that it is Tao becoming conscious of itself through a word. There is the Tao, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit between them, the consciousness between them. That is a standard for a word. And that creates civilization. Civilization needs that. It needs that. So that's why China has two bases, it has Taoism and it needs Confucianism. Whereas Bhagavad Gita is just one. The Bible is just one because it has both these elements of something, because Confucius provides things that are needed for society in some form. Whereas that is all built in to the concept. It starts with the concept of the word, and then the word becoming flesh and the rest of it in the Bible. And the same thing with the Om being expressed as multiple words and making everything. So there is that loop between starting with reality, using consciousness to come up with the universal principles. The word is the universal principle, which then is made flesh by implementing it, by the virtuous action that comes through that. So you have this full loop of reality, consciousness, principle, virtuous action, the results of it being God on earth, city of God on earth. That's the loop that is being aimed at in its own way with the Bible and with Bhagavad Gita. So just beautiful, beautiful observations, Paul. Just thank you so much. All right, next up, I think Ocean had his hand up. Ocean.
I think he left, Shrikant. I think he said he
Oh.
had to go in the chat.
Okay. All right, anybody else wants to make any comments at all? You're welcome to do that. You can comment on anything that was said by anybody. Would love to hear anything that you have to say. But this is so amazing discussion. We're going to go with Kwan followed by Joe. Kwan.
Just a short answer to Paul. I heard you said the point that the divine is a word that is not too exciting for you. So maybe rather than animal and divine, I suggest time and timelessness.
Thank you, Kwan. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, just a really quick point about this evening is that it's been really interesting for this particular is to see the Tao in the art of war. And that kind of connection has been very, very interesting to make while we've been, and it's only in the first two chapters. Like the subtlety of the Tao, the humility of the Tao that you start to see, it's almost deception to a certain degree, not to be braggadocious or to essentially be just put yourself out there, but the how that works into the element of war and into the deception, I'll call it, aspect of it, and also in the sense that how just nature, just being, there's a certain peacefulness that exists in a Tao that kind of still exists in the art of war. And that link has been really interesting to make. I think it's been one of the more interesting things to do. And the other aspect of it is that I like about the art of war, just one more comment, is that you can actually almost draw the text out. You can actually create frameworks that based on principles and then build off of those and really put together ideas. That's the other part. And that is unique to probably, it's easier in the art of war. It's a little bit more narrow. So anyway, I just wanted to make those comments because it's a really good series.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so I want to tell you about some really amazing meetups coming up. Tomorrow, I don't know what I'm going to do about this, but we're going to be discussing beauty of language. It's such a rich topic, such a powerful topic, and it depends on who will show up and what they will say, because I really want to hear what people think about the beauty of language. and would love to have conversation. So that's going to be tomorrow. On Thursday, actually, Gary has prepared an amazing presentation of these 3 stages, mostly based on the Old Testament of the Eden, where God and man are together, living in this garden, and then the fall, and then, Christ kind of bringing it back. These 3 stages, and I'm going to try, I don't know, I'm going to use Julian Jaynes' ideas in order to try to address that. I don't know how it's going to go, but that's going to be on Thursday. On Friday, are you guys doing the Designing the Life this time? What is it?
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we are, right?
No? Okay, then we'll figure something out. Then on Sunday, Kurt McNamara is going to be here. He's writing a book on Bucky for Designers. And he has agreed to actually write the book on 52 living ideas. So he's going to go chapter by chapter, and he's going to present chapter as he writes it, and then get all the feedback from everybody to improve the chapter. So it's every month he will come and present a chapter. So that's what is coming up. All right, folks. It's just, I'm so grateful, and it's just an honor to have all of you folks here. It's just amazing. Thank you so much, folks. Good night, everybody. Bye.